Hello, everyone, and welcome to TBR's final Future Friday TBR 2015's Predictions webinar, a thought leadership series we've presented each Friday between January 16th and February 13th, 2015. Each Friday, TBR's research team shared predictions for 2015 and beyond across the hardware, software, cloud, security, devices, professional services, telecom, and digital markets. Top TBR analysts addressed the trends, drivers, and business outcomes they predict will occur throughout the year. The Future Friday webinar series stakes out the status, changes, and key market directions across discrete segments in the coming year and in the future. Before we start, there are a few housekeeping items I'd like to cover. First, we will be recording today's session and posting it on our YouTube site, TBRI channel. We encourage you to visit our channel to watch this presentation or any of the others we've posted. Second, we'd like to hear your opinions and thoughts on the material we're presenting. Please send any questions or comments through the Q&A or chat function. The presenters will address them at the end of the session, or if you'd like to set up a client inquiry for more detailed discussion, please reach out directly to us at the end of the webinar to set up those calls. Third, we will send out the slides to everyone registered for today's webcast within 24 hours of the conclusion of the webinar. You can also find the slides, as well as our thought leadership pieces, other webinars, and commentaries on our SlideShare site, which will be noted at the slide at the end of this presentation and shared in the chat function during this show. My name is Stuart Williams. I'm the Vice President of Research here at TBR. I'll be leading today's webinar. I'm joined by three of our practice leads, Jeff Willicott, who leads our software and BI practice, Alan Kranz, who leads our cloud practice, and Patrick Heffernan, who leads our IT services and management consulting practices. The key story for the ICT segment, meaning information and communication technology, is that evolution and adaptation will drive the rise or fall of vendors. The change factor, the transition point that we've hit this year is that buyer behaviors have evolved to the point where most of the vendors need to leave or extend their traditional business models. Winning in this environment means adapting their portfolio, service catalog, and go-to-markets to address all buyer categories. And the adaptation to win requires changes across strategy, engineering, go-to-market, and service. And these are more than just technical changes. They include cultural and customer relationship changes that are key to winning and retaining the business. So what's happening? What is the transition? What is the tipping point? What we see here is data from TBR's multiple industry benchmarks compared against worldwide GDP and overall projections for IT budget growth. And we can clearly see that there are several segments where growth historically has been moderate, but has been declining over time. And we have segments that are growing extremely rapidly, and we see that buyer spend is jumping, forcing businesses and market evolution to adapt. The telecom business, data center business, devices, IT services, telecom hardware, and actually just as we were updating this presentation today, we got our most recent benchmark information on the annual growth rate for software that it's come down to about 4%. So these are all segments that have very slow or low single-digit growth, and those are all inclusive of their cloud or other service areas. So these are areas where the traditional models are in sharp decline, and the needs of the new types of buyers who are moving to these models are driving business success. So if the premise is that IT is an enabler of business, there are three categories of buyers that vendors need to align to in order to optimize their mix and be able to address the maximum opportunity in the marketplace. The first category is an outcome-based buyer. This is someone, could be an IT or it could be a line of business buyer, who purchases for a business outcome, but they're not purchasing the technology. In this case, the provider, the person they're buying from, is providing innovation to them because they're looking for an outcome of some kind. They're looking for compute as a service, or they're looking for a sales force automation solution to make their business performance improved. The second category are buyers who are building solutions. So these are buyers who are building something from platforms, but they do not want to own the basic underlying technology. So in this case, the buyers are choosing from vendors who provide innovation, but they're also bringing their own innovation to the table. So this is a co-innovation situation, in many cases driven by the technical innovation that the provider brings, as well as the reach and scope of that ecosystem. The third category is the own and control buyer. Now, these are your traditional core IT buyers who buy the boxes, who buy the packaged software, who buy the IT outsourcing services. These are folks who build solutions from basic technology, in which case the builder is innovating separate from the technology innovation. What that means is the builder is taking all of these components that do have innovation inside of them, but they're integrating them in a unique fashion from the bottom up. A great example here would be, say, a Wall Street company's trading platform that they run on a mainframe. It's highly proprietary and very differentiating. So what do we see when we look at a business with all of the buyer behaviors? We see that what used to be a large own and control base is lifting up into folks who are building solutions and buying outcomes. And this mix is playing out across business processes. So I know that there have been a lot of folks out there who talk about the outcome-based economy or the API economy. Those are categories 1 and 2. But what we really have here is a more complex situation where the IT buyers are making decisions based on the needs, and those needs are characterized by what they need to deliver that business process and whether that requirement is for differentiation or for scalability or reach or things that another vendor can provide to them, or whether these are non-differentiating functions. So this is just an example mocked up workflow here of business process end to end. It would start with a new type of a buyer that had shifted up from, why would a company build a social platform when they can go out and access one from Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn? That may create leads that would drive down into the public cloud. Maybe they have an access portal that would drive also information down into a custom application that they may be running at a vendor site built on a platform as a service. That information would flow down into their very proprietary, owned and controlled, perhaps it's order processing or some back office or other function software that they're running on the mainframe, and then it would return back up through the platform and out to the outcome layers as they have optimized this process. So in order to, what we see in the marketplace is that, the CIOs, the CMOs, chief security officers are all trying to balance these types of decisions. What do I need? What are the requirements? What's the risk of owning it versus sharing that innovation with the provider? And we've done a significant number of interviews that talk about how the participants in this economy have been able to speak to it. So I'm just going to do a quick roundtable here for an example from some of our practice leads. Jeff?
Well, one of the things that we're seeing, I came in off the red eye from the SAP SuccessFactors Strategy Day, and the movement for innovation, at least from these software vendors, is going to be on the public cloud, because they are saying that in the old days what was going on in the own and control, or even with the solution builders, of customization, which was articulated as a swear word, that what you need instead is configuration and extensions, which would be the build solutions, say if an extension building a solution around an extension around what they're offering as a core platform. So you're going to see the speed of innovation coming out in these public cloud layers around software as a service. So what SAP is lining up to do sounds very similar to what IBM has articulated, in that SaaS is going to stay in the commerce unit, that they will have these extensions for the outcome-based buyer with a pass layer where they can add the extensions. But if you get down into customization, what the software firms are saying is you will lose some of the innovation because you are customizing the core underlying technology that they intend to deploy so that they can just stay on the innovation track and continuous releases.
Alan?
Yeah. And so some of the other shifts from the cloud side we're seeing is, so these types of frameworks apply not only to end customers, but also to the partner communities. So we think a big shift in 2015 is going to be more traction from both the ISVs, the cloud startups, enterprise customers, all building on cloud platforms to provide more flexible deployment of new services and cede some of that control for the underlying infrastructure to develop and test and deploy solutions, whether they're targeting, whether you're a retailer building mobile apps to target your customer base, whether you're a ISV that is shifting from a traditional license model to a cloud-delivered one, that middle category is where a lot of the kind of next legs for cloud growth. It's going to go beyond just the big direct providers and have more fragmented network of providers, targeting different verticals or different regions, different use cases, all building on top of a platform. And so that's a big model for both the partners as well as for the platform providers to be able to provide an environment that can be built upon, customized, and then eventually deployed to the end user.
And this is Patrick Heffernan. From the IT services perspective, you could put another star there by own and control, and instead of labeling it new, you could label it disappearing fast. From the buyer's perspective around services, we're moving rapidly even away from building solutions. The companies, the vendors that have been most successful are the ones that are able to talk about buying outcomes, talk about providing outcomes, and get beyond the technology discussion, get beyond the interaction with the CIO, and really discuss what the options are, what the outcomes are going to be with the other parts of the organization, the other parts of the C-suite. And we're seeing this most dramatically, I think, in the management consulting space, where strategy consulting, which had been a little bit on the wane for a couple of years, where emerging technologies, everyone wanted to talk about cloud, and everyone wanted to talk about analytics. Now we're back to talking about strategy and how do you actually get the outcome from all these emerging technologies.
So the customer shift of behavior as they reconfigure their business processes, as they look to new technologies and new ways to consume ICT, has put billions of dollars in flight. The characteristics for the outcome, at the highest level is, in general, these are non-differentiating workloads, something where the vendor can provide expertise, say things like HR or CRM. Companies need them, but they're not going to differentiate based on that. Maybe if they are, they're going to pull that down into own and control. But we can see here some of the numbers for around public cloud, around the private cloud, and cloud components, things that people are using to build these clouds. Very significant market sizes, 67 billion, 41 billion, and 28 billion in 2015, with growth rates in the mid-teens to mid-20% range. So how do vendors begin to understand these three categories? This isn't, like there's one person who says, puts their hand up and says all the time, I'm an outcome-based buyer. The buyer categories are really driven by the needs of the organization at any one particular time. IT buying is a complex purchase. There are multiple stakeholders involved, and they have to balance a lot of their requirements. So in our research, we see a balance of people by different role, but when we net it out, we see the outcome-based purchase is, where people are looking for scaling that can be provided by, public cloud, that maybe they want to shift the cost to an OpEx model. Say they're buying analytics, they may be looking for a company that can give them rapidly deliver new business insights to them. So there's opportunity here to speak across the roles and help these communities of inside an enterprise determine whether they want to buy one way or the other. A build purchase, for where they're looking for a platform may be driven by openness. Maybe they want to use an open platform. Agility and DevOps is an increasingly important reason to drive to using platforms and outcomes, because that's where the vendor's actually managing the solution for you, and you can focus on what you do best. The own and control, those are some of the arguments where that needs to change away from just that's where the money is to, why would I buy another box? Why would I buy an own and control and have somebody specialized in that? Because it's differentiating, that workload's differentiating for me. So it's core to the business, it's customizable. Jeff mentioned that, the shift is on for provided solutions to be configured. Customization is going to decline. It's really going to be for those bespoke applications that are at the tip of the spear. So as vendors, how do we help customers, right? So we help them to find their categories, and part of that is developing messages and also understanding the dynamics of your marketplace, because for every outcome-based buyer or buyer who's building something on a platform, there is an underlying person somewhere who owns and controls that infrastructure. It may be you as a vendor, it may be somebody down the value chain for you. So the sales messages, effectively are, I want my sales team to be more effective for an outcome, right? That's a business outcome. Maybe the compute team wants to buy cycles rather than to buy computers. A mobile app, so I want to build a mobile app with location services. That's, why would I duplicate what Google has done with Google Maps when I can tap into that for my mobile app? And obviously, where you need it, folks are still going to want control of a data center, flexible infrastructure, and do custom applications. But that's really under a pointed circumstance now, and that actually creates a reason for value. So adapting your go-to-market really involves a couple of stages. So the first part is you have to be able to develop the portfolio to be able to address all of these folks. And then the second part is the customer journeys, what drives the behavior is need, but the means of engagement and the modes through which customers like to be engaged are different for each of these three areas. So we're gonna stop here for a little bit and do a little bit of a roundtable. Then later on in the presentation, we're going to get under the covers.
This is Jeff speaking. This is one of the, we fixate on the technological aspects of what's changing in our industry, but more importantly, at least from where I sit, is the change in the sales and marketing and the go-to-market that's going on. And one of the problems with it is those who are successful in the old model are not necessarily going to be successful in the new one. It's not quite as critical for the larger vendors, but I was doing C-suite level interviews in 09 and 10 with medium-sized SIs who were struggling with it back then. They were kind of the early adopter, getting into public cloud, and their pain point in 09 and 10 was how to get to the hybrid cloud. But at the same time, it was that the salespeople who were successful in the old model were not buying into shifting how they did things to get into the new model, because it is very cyclical. And what is needed in the outcome-based area is less of the sales, the heat-seeking missile transactional sales rep, and what is needed instead is a customer journey sort of pre-sales SE on steroids to be there to assist them in understanding the difference between the on-premise technological capabilities and the cloud, and how they need to not do the customizations to be able to avail themselves of the features and enhancements that are being streamed monthly or quarterly. They're putting them out in itty-bitty chunks, so that rep has to be on site, because the transformation that is going on is so fundamentally different, there needs to be a lot of customer handholding so they fully exploit the advantages of what this new technology provides to business.
So as more of the new model shifts up into the assembly and outcomes, I think the other thing that comes out is the pace of the transaction, that instead of having to go through long sales cycles where there's lots of upfront investment, proof of concept, the thing that a lot of the pure play cloud companies, bank on is being able to do very rapid proof of concept, being able to provide trial licenses. That connection between your business problem and the IT solution is a lot closer. And so that brings with it a different go-to-market technique around a lot of evangelism, excitement, but also establishing credibility for a lot of these smaller vendors. They have to prove the value not just of their solution, but also of this new delivery method in general before they can get to that sales cycle. And so it's a different method of marketing we found. It needs to be a lot closer to the way that both on IT and line of business that they're evaluating these different offerings, and then moving very rapidly into the trial, which is a great attribute from a sales perspective in terms of how they can show the value of the solutions to prospective customers.
And this is Patrick, and from the services space, I think a lot of the IT services firms, the ones that are not growing the fastest and are a little bit stuck, are the ones that are still doing that self-control. They're still designing IT rather than designing outcomes. I think everyone is talking about being at the top of that go-to-market strategy of selling outcomes, but I think in the long term, looking ahead, sort of in the future, it's going to be actually in the middle, because all of us have become over the last decade or whatever so much more comfortable with our own personal IT, with technology in our lives, that we're actually going to want something that is beyond just excitement and enhancement. We're going to want something that's actually tailored, that we can experiment with, that's agile. And I think of companies like IBM and Accenture that at the moment, when they present, they talk very much at that top level of selling outcomes. When you push them a little bit, then they get into that middle area, which is I think where the hard work is really happening right now and where their success is coming. And then when you really push, then you get them, you get sort of the guys in the room that all they want to talk about are the speeds and the feeds and what the technology is. And I think that part has become so commoditized that as we're going forward, the companies that stay stuck there are going to stay stuck, and the companies that are able to really successfully do that middle cell assembly part of the go-to-market will do the best.
Yep. And we're going to get into each one of these in a couple of seconds. So what does winning mean? Now that we realize that there's these different customer journeys, that each of these journeys has different requirements that happen at different paces, it puts a huge challenge to vendors. And the imperatives really fall into three areas. One is, do you have the capacity to address opportunity across the value chain? Meaning, this is the disruption question. How do you, get to new customers and new markets? How do you get to that disruptive area of the field if you continue to do things the way you've always done them, right? The second part is ecosystems are becoming incredibly important. If you cannot develop a solution or sell to one of the three types of buyers, you need to develop a partner who can, and they give them margin and give them support and success and show them opportunity, and also raise the barriers, the switching barriers. And then on the other side, between all of the partners, how do you foster the commons, the common relationships, the sense that you're all stronger by hanging together than you are separately. And then if you are going to go this route of delivering a solution to all customer types, and we see several vendors trying to do this, IBM comes to mind, Oracle is working on this. We have big challenges in aligning, not just the product portfolio, but backing up into how you sell, how you support, how you bring those solution value through the delivery. It's all very complicated. We're going to step through some of those examples. So to kind of crack this open, I kind of took an archetypical view at a potential company that covers a couple of different segments, and say, well, how do you begin to adapt IP that you may have into across all of these different customer types, right? So we have cell outcomes, cell assembly, and cell control, left to right, and we have different categories. So this company has different offerings that it has in white. The green areas represent kind of an opportunity for them to take what they already have and adapt it to serve new markets. So this company sells hardware, so how do they sell that as an outcome? Infrastructure as a service, that's kind of an easy decision. Obviously, there are business dynamics that are there that involve competition and the race to the bottom, but they could do that through private or managed outcomes for specific segments of the market. But the cell assembly piece, how do you create hardware and enable that as a platform to access new segments of the market? That's really, maybe the idea of embedding software and silicon together and offering that as a platform to people who are getting into new areas of the market is something that they could begin to do. So, being able to, I threw a kind of professional services, I said white labeling professional services, that's kind of a unicorn, but it could be done. Finance is a great example here. So you have a finance group that can issue and support transactions. Why not open that up? Dealer financing, is a common practice. How about taking it all the way down? If I can get myself a mortgage refinanced online without ever talking to a human being, why can't IT do that through self-financing? Again, and then kind of down at the bottom, I kind of looked at printing and saying, hey, well, there's a nascent field there. How do you take IP and printing technology and be able to say, how do we bring that across all three buyers? There'd be a 3D print service, maybe, get in touch with some office supply company that needs a compelling reason for people to join, or there may be a manufacturer. If you think about shortcutting the supply chain, they don't want to own the printer. What they want to do is own the design that gets for printing out 3D printed mufflers for Ford, right? And you can put that in place and run that as a service, or you can sell it as a platform for somebody else to develop that, as well as selling your own 3D printing. So, there are market recognitions here where you take the core intellectual property and express it out in different ways. So what does this mean? That the traditional value chain does not enable new offerings, right? This is kind of one view, the end-to-end supply chain. All of our traditional vendors are kind of located in here. They're locked into these spaces. They're competing amongst each other. This is what some people will call the red ocean strategy, right? Very hard to win. Sometimes it's about innovative technology. A lot of times it's about sales effectiveness. So how do you win new buyers? You do this by jumping across the value chain. So if you're a company that has access to processors and memory, you can, and the ability to create them into devices, maybe you attach them to a network and you get a partner who can provide you quality of service as an outcome, buy some tools or partner with some tools so that you can turn it into a platform for Internet of Things builders who then will turn that into people who want Internet of Things outcomes. You could own this new supply chain straight out, or you could work as a partnership in an ecosystem to build this. And this is an opportunity where we see a lot of open source kind of coming in and doing disruptions right now as we go through this. So now I want to take a couple of seconds and go through some examples. So we talked about selling outcomes. We talked about the customer journey from excite to engage to expand and then enhance. The outcome here is really being prepared to take on risk and provide innovation on behalf of the customer. So what does that path look like? If you think about the decisions of either making something, buying it, or getting it through an alliance, this is one pathway to get to the customer, who's represented by a triangle on the right there. So, as you're building an outcome, you want to have, obviously, IP is very important because that's the innovation source. You're providing innovation to the customer. If it's your solution you're providing, you've got to build it. You may, if it's a software as a solution, you may have an infrastructure partner. And then the way you sell, as Alan mentioned, self-service sales or inside sales are very, very important. The routes to market, who you sell to, and the channels through which you go. Here we've represented a direct sale through inside sales through the self-service, but also a reseller community who's bringing that and they're providing support. And then jointly you're ensuring customer success with support, maintenance services, implementation services in order for the customer to get the full value. This is very, you know, when you tie it to the value chain of going from enticing somebody to getting them to trial it, to getting them to get full use and utilization of the solution, and then expanding the number of seats or expanding the number of types of services they're consuming from you is an extremely important series to have put into order. And I know that Alan's done a lot of work on this in the go-to-market and the routes to market, and Jeff is obviously covering a lot of these spaces. So we have gentlemen, do you have some comments on this?
Well, as I was discussing with you prior to the webinar, I had a clear example of the shift from the Fortis 5 forces into this complementary assets, doing a custom engagement for a PC manufacturer trying to decide whether to go big or go home in the space, and they were worried about aftermarket service. Now, my second job in the IT industry was as a field service marketer, and I had to rely on third-party maintainers for regions that were outside of where we were. So I was stumbling around trying to find TRW and Sorvis seemed to have gone away. I couldn't find them, so I had a high-level one-on-one executive interview, and that's been broken up. That's gone into the complementary assets. It's no longer having the van in the inventory and the screwdriver to hop in the van and go fix it. It's all been disaggregated, where distributors will do warehousing as a service for the vendor. There's somebody doing the call center support as an independent entity. The customers call into the call center support. They go find the van with the screwdriver. They ship the part out of the warehouse, and then they go track the customer service results of that by hitting the end customer after the service has been repaired. All that has been disaggregated. All that's moved to a lie. All these independent entities are the complementary assets stitched together because the margins aren't there to do PC repair service and make a buck at it. You're better off just putting your money in a CD, even though they're at about 0.25%. So that was an illustration to me of sort of being Winkle and waking up and going back into third-party maintenance to see that this whole business model is kind of disaggregated into these complementary assets.
I think the other thing is the importance of that last category around services, we think is becoming more distinct going forward than it has been. And that's going to take place in a couple different ways. Patrick can probably talk to the people side of that, but also, you know, when you look at the role of the partner in terms of the recommendation, the solutioning in terms of all these different outcomes, a lot of the onus has been on the part of the customer to weed through, find the right one or the right combination given their business. And so the value for a channel to help customers through that process, to support it, do the admin around that, we think is more important going forward, as well as the automation from a platform perspective. For instance, AWS has added an advisor function that looks at the use of their services over time, understands different metrics about the customer, and recommends changes in the environment and changes in the different add-on services that are being consumed as part of that customer's use of the service in an automated way. So it's not additional headcount or expense, but it still delivers that additional service and fine-tuning for the customer in terms of those solutions that delivers value and, again, enhances the experience for these more automated type cloud solutions.
So when we look at the customer journey for selling assembly, so this is around the platform wars. Yeah, we had one of our webinars talked about the coming platform wars. It's really on its way. It's incredibly important when you're making enterprise decisions and you're building applications. You're adopting innovation that the platform provider gives to you, and So making that decision and committing your enterprise to that platform requires some understanding that that provider, that partner, is going to be there for a while. So we see there's a lot of people experimenting with different types of platforms, but it's really going to whittle down to what becomes offered or acquired by the vendors who move forward in this space. So this is a very different looking pathway for the platforms. So when we look at the intellectual property, the stuff that you're going to use to build that, you've made the decision to build a platform, you're going to make some of it yourself. You're going to buy some of it. You're going to ally for some of it. So when we look at a company like IBM in this space with Bluemix, there's a lot of IBM intellectual property that's built into that solution. But they're using Cloud Foundry. They're also making some acquisitions. We anticipate that they're going to make more around the tooling space as they convert what had been a traditional development environment into a true platform. And when they begin to integrate other IP like Watson or other IP into services that can then be woven into an application along the way. So they've got to build that all. And then the go-to-market kind of jumps down to the person who's going to consume it, right? So this is a developer community or developers who are inside an enterprise. So the trial, the experimentation, that's why a little bit of a dotted line there, because, there's a lot of community building and ISV investments that are along the way. So as they're building, they need to know that they like to know that there are other people building with this too, people that they respect, places where they can go for support. And that's really the service area there. Part of that is delivered by the community, part of that's developed by mentors, and a lot of it is delivered technically and on the support of these platforms through the provider themselves. So if you're building that platform, you also have to support it through the solution that's being developed on it. And so we see, the requirements. These are very powerful complementary assets that you have to really win this space. We see some people doing some interesting things with some development tool sets, but to put it all together, you need to have all of these assets for the enterprise. Okay. And then the last piece that we have really is the own and control space, right? So this is a very traditional IT buyer. The differentiation here is really that folks are they need solutions that are built from basic technology, and they're innovating on top of core technology. So this is the tip of the pyramid, what used to be the whole pyramid, but now it's going to become the tip of the pyramid as the use cases for owning and controlling really get focused around differentiated workloads, areas where I'm going to really pour my enterprise heart and soul. That's going to be the core IT that facilitates my value proposition in the marketplace. So, this involves a lot of elements because, this has a huge amount of value. And I think the pathway here, there are a lot of people who talk about, commoditization and how people are moving away from, how the outcome is really the new market. Sure it is. There's a lot of money there. But don't forget that this is where companies, big enterprises, are going to differentiate. This is where their core business is located. This is extremely high-value workloads to enter into this marketplace. And vendors who can sell this space have longevity. We look at what IBM is doing with mainframes. The workloads that are running on mainframes in this day and age are largely not going to shift a lot. That's my prediction. You're getting a lot of utility out of it. So, it's very, very difficult to think that this is going to go away anytime soon. I just want to do a last little roundtable on this, and we'll move to the conclusion in the Q&A section.
Well, when I look at this disaggregation into make, buy, or rely across the chevrons going left to right, what I see, I've been saying quite a bit that everything I knew up until about 3 or 4 years ago doesn't apply anymore. It's in a lot of ways the opposite. And when you get into the ecosystems, and by that I mean the large vendors working with the small vendors, they used to be used to push off and offload sales expense and services repair. It was to reduce the cost of maintaining the account. It's those ecosystems or those partner programs are flipping. It is to rapidly absorb and pull in as quickly as you can intellectual property that isn't coming from your R&D spend line. And once you get it in, you assemble it. That's the need for the open APIs, for Docker containers, on and on down the line, for configuration and extensions, for open power foundations. And that aggregation of IP then needs to be bundled up for the routes to market and for the servicing that comes in after it. And it's a fundamental shift down there. It's going to have a huge impact on those small entities, the ISVs and the VARs. A lot of them are going to go under. Some of them will be because individuals are retiring. They've been at it for 20 years. They don't have the annuity revenue streams. They don't want to get into managed services. They'll just punch out. But there's a huge shift in those partner communities because what the large vendor needs from those small vendors has flipped from sales and marketing over into IP.
I mean, I think part of the other impact here is that although this presentation is laid out with very distinct categories, there's a lot of blending between having different components of workloads on-prem for transactional or sensitive data, having complementary services that are either customized or off-the-shelf, being integrated in and performing different functions that roll back to that core set of data and services, and that in reality, you're going to see a lot of blending. And the challenge will be for customers to both design as well as operate and maintain that complexity in terms of dealing with the different delivery options, which are now much more diverse than just building it on-prem and running it yourself.
Yeah, and you put what Jeff and Alan just said, put it together, and there's so much confusion and so many options in the marketplace that that's the easy and obvious case for IT services around both strategy and design and eventually implementation and maintenance. But beyond that, I think, and it's reflected here, it's reflected even more in the previous slides. Within the IT services space, the reliance on allies, on partners, on partnerships, on business relationships that are set up so that an IT services vendor can say they're end-to-end, even if, what it really means is they've got a lot of partners, whether that's a cloud partner or a software partner or a hardware partner, wherever it is. No one actually is truly end-to-end, and there's so much ground to cover that no one ever could be, and this slide shows it here as well, and the example just before it, that of make, buy, and ally for IT services, it's that ally piece on the bottom that's critical.
So in conclusion, I just want to wrap up and say that, the revenue, the buyer behavior, and the categories are driving vendor behavior. The customers, the buyers are being driven by their needs, and also the fact that they've seen examples in the marketplace. They've begun to taste and make investments in outcome and platform-based portfolios. In our customer research, we see a greater need for vendors to make that transition. We see firms like IBM and Microsoft and SAP and Oracle and Cisco, beginning to move in this direction. These are extremely difficult requirements for a large vendor to adapt to, just in adapting the portfolio to outcome and then as well as own and control. So the challenge here is not just being able to come up with a portfolio and come up with a marketing schema, but to truly look across all of these and decide where is the vendor going to enter, where are they going to play. So we're going to have a couple of questions here as we go around, and we're going to go to Jeff first, and we're going to talk about. We have a question here that says, how does analytics impact the buyer type?
That's a tough one because I'm not sure how to say that it doesn't impact almost all of it. And by that I mean we get hit here because we talk about business intelligence rather than big data and analytics. And to us, big data and analytics that isn't enough. It's what you do with it. It's how you deploy it. It's how you act upon it, which goes into the services-led piece that Patrick talks about change management. The other thing that analytics is doing is it is reducing the time to intelligence. It's therefore compressing any competitive advantage that you get from this. On one hand, from an outcome perspective. From a services perspective, because of the speed of deployment, services automation is now stripping labor out of the delivery cycle. And stripping labor out of the delivery cycle, you need to maintain a higher profit margin rather than just go the way I was taught how to price out project work, which is take the body, multiply by 3, 4, or 5, estimate the hours, and you're off to the races. You now have to take, what is that IP that I'm deploying on it? How much value is there that I can get to? And what's happening now is the race to the bottom that we saw in hardware, and we're potentially seeing in the cloud, because few of them are turning profits at the present time, and they're all waving the wand saying that renewal rates are going to be the savior that'll keep them from being just .com bubble 2. It's hitting in services, and it's stripping bodies out of the market. So analytics is pervasive. It's overblown a little bit. As we've said here, there's going to be some very, very colossal events. Some of them will be good, and some of them will be bad. And then from there, we'll regroup and we'll continue to improve.
So one of the reasons earlier on I said that the own and control buyer is destined for death is that what we're seeing in the business intelligence and analytics services space, and we have a webinar on it next week, in fact, Tuesday at 1 o'clock, and we'll be talking about both the vendors themselves and then also our results from our buyer research. And what analytics is doing is as I mentioned earlier, it's sort of creating it's facilitating that move for a new class of buyers that are so comfortable with both IT and with outcomes that that's what they expect and that's what they want to buy, rather than buying that sort of own and control, that hard IT that we think of from before. So that's another impact, I think. My sense is that the reason I have come to the conclusion I came to earlier is in large part informed by the impact of analytics.
So let's come down to the last questions here, and we're going to do a quick roundtable around what are the services, cloud, or software predictions you were afraid to put in writing. And I'm actually going to lead off with an industry-wide view and say, you know, the transition point that we're at right now is such a challenge, and buyer dollars are really ready to go to a vendor that can provide them with the outcome or the solution set, the right mix of solutions that they need to drive their business. That, you know, some of the very large vendors, we're talking about firms that were late to recognize cloud, like Oracle and HP, are going to be extremely challenged to do this all on their own. They need to work with their partners and their communities and develop the pathways to drive the business through all of these channels. And I think that we see evidence that both of those companies are working on this. But again, there's a lot of other noise in the marketplace at this point, and they're just a little bit behind. The other piece certainly are the carriers. We see a huge challenge in the carriers. Michael Sullivan Trainer did a commentary about the challenge to the carriers and staying relevant in the time when cloud and other services are really pushing them to just be the data carriers. So there's another challenge for them to find their place in what we're calling the carrier cloud as they evolve. So I'll throw the last, you know, what's the prediction you were afraid to make to the rest of the group?
Who wants to go first?
Who's first?
Who's going first?
So, I mean, I think in the cloud side, you know, that you can actually see providers tell customers that cloud isn't always less expensive, that you've seen this dynamic. It reminds me of a Simpsons episode where you have people protesting for more services and less taxes. And it doesn't, to be able to get a solution.
Not just a Simpsons episode.
You can't be driving a vendor to provide everything at the lowest cost and to operate at a loss, while saying, I don't want just the technology, I want you to make it relevant for me and my business. And so I think with some of the hybridization, the growth in private cloud services, you're starting to see that, you know, neither side wants to really come to this recognition that it's not going to be all about cost going forward, that to be able to deliver the level of service and innovation and customization, that those are things that are not going to come cheaply. So unless you're a startup, you know, starting at ground zero on AWS, you're going to have things that are going to stay where they are, that need to integrate, and that you know, complexity is something that is not going to continue to drive year-over-year decreases in terms of the level of expenditures in IT, regardless of whether it's on-prem or in a cloud environment.
So, you want to go next? All right. This is what I'm afraid to put on paper. This is a prediction I'm afraid to put in writing. There's a scene in one of the Bourne movies where, in the Jason Bourne movies, where they're trying to figure out who's giving him directions and who's telling him what to do, and his old handler in Paris, Nicky, says, scary scenario, he is. And that's where I think the scary scenario for services is. When you combine automation, when you combine cognitive computing, and you think that there's going to be a spike in consulting, which I think there will be, in the near term as everybody tries to wrap their heads around how do you actually deploy analytics, how do you deploy cloud, how do you deploy all this emerging technology, and then it falls off a cliff. And now it goes from we got to hire McKinsey to explain this to us to, well, we got IBM's Watson, or we got Google Analytics, or we have you know, a player that we're not even thinking about right now that comes in and combines automation and cognitive computing and predictive analytics, and now consulting becomes something that, you know, it's almost like H&R Block. You know, you buy that tax software, so you just buy consulting software. You just buy a solution. That solution buyer, that outcomes buyer we're talking about, may not ever need to call up McKinsey again. That's the scary one I'm not putting down in writing.
Right, and that corroborates the one I'm looking at, that you won't have Homer Simpson at the nuclear power plant control panel, but you'll have 1 or 2, 3 people, one to many. And I think what we've seen our industry do to publishing, what we've seen it do to media and entertainment, what we've seen it do to music, IT has destroyed a number of industries in the business model and stripped huge amounts of jobs out of that workflow. And analytics is, you know, the joke I use is HAL from 2001: A Space Odyssey, which if you back up the letters is IBM. Is we're at the beginning of what could become HAL, and I think we're at the beginning of severe job loss. We're going to see that in the channel. We're going to see that with VARs just going down, going under, because they can't make the jump in the business models. There isn't the monetization streams. And they're just a canary in the coal mine, because they're just a small scale of what all the other vendors are. And I worry about how the number of jobs we're going to have left. That's the one I don't want to put down. I hope to retire on my own terms, because I don't want to hand out carts at Walmart in Tennessee before I'm ready.
Yeah. So this is Stuart Williams, and I'd like to thank Jeff and Alan and Patrick for joining me today on this ICT Future Fridays webcast. Certainly, if you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to us. All our contact information is here. We'd be happy to get on a call with you. You can follow us on the Twitter handles listed here, as well as check out our other content on SlideShare and YouTube, which the links are provided here. Before you sign off, we'd like to ask you to take a brief survey about today's webinar. As we research the performance of technology companies, we're also studying how we're helping our clients, and we'd appreciate your feedback. So we'll leave the chat function open for another couple of minutes to give folks a chance for any last-minute questions, and hope we see you all again soon. Thank you very much.